You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
Let's play a little game of Would You Rather, School Counselor Edition. Okay, would you rather spend your weekend planning a group or spend your afternoon sitting in irrelevant PD? Yikes. Or would you rather be the only counselor with no one to collaborate with, or to spend hours searching online for engaging activities? All of these options are pretty bad, right? But unfortunately, they're all too real. But what if I told you I had a solution for you? What if I told you I had access to hundreds of school counseling lessons, groups, and activities, counselor-specific trainings on the topics you need most, and a community of like-minded school counselors to support you? You would say, yes, please. Well, that is what Impact is all about. Impact is my monthly membership for school counselors, and it helps you with all of these things. You get access to hundreds of resources. That's unlimited free downloads. Log in and get what you need right away to every single resource that's in my store. We add new resources each and every month. We're adding a new middle school and elementary resource each month, and some of these are bonus Impact exclusives, meaning that you can get resources just for members. You can request resources that you need and easily search so you can find exactly what you're looking for. And let's talk about the trainings, counselor-specific trainings on the topics you need most. We do these each and every month as part of our Coffee with the Counselor series. Impact members get to join for absolutely free. You earn PD certificates and you get exclusive access to members-only things like the Ultimate Small Group Experience and our Summer Summit Conference. And the community. Y'all, this is possibly my favorite part of Impact. I so look forward to jumping on these calls, to getting to know counselors who are similar to me and also completely different. It's so fun to hear from your experiences and your challenges, and everyone brings a unique perspective to the table. We have an exclusive online community, and we even have a cool app where you can chat with other counselors in these community circles. We have our monthly calls, like I mentioned, twice a month, and we share wins, troubleshoot tough cases, and just talk about what it's like to be a counselor, because so often we're on our own island at our school sites. So if any of that sounds like it's for you, I would love to see you inside Impact. Go to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact to solve all of your counselor problems. And I have a special offer for my listeners. Use code POD at checkout to save 10% off your first month. Okay, let's go to today's episode. Hey there, thanks for listening to another episode of School Counseling Simplified. Today I have Casey on the podcast. Casey is a school counselor behind Whole Child Counseling, and she also is an author of Skills for Big Feelings, a guide for teaching kids relaxation, regulation, and coping techniques. That's what makes her the perfect guest to have on the podcast to continue our conversations around anxiety. She talks all about how to use structured activities to help anxious students, how she used expressive arts with her students, including a really cool activity you can try if you're a middle school counselor, and how to get kids in the somatic feeling space, because so often their anxious kiddos are stuck in their head all the time. So I love chatting with Casey. She's just so fun to talk to. She's actually going to be one of our presenters at the Summer Summit this year. That's coming up in June. Stay tuned for all the details. But yes, so she'll be presenting there as well. I just know you're going to love this episode with Casey. So let's go ahead and dive in. Hey, Casey, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited to chat with you today. We've been doing a lot of little projects together lately, so it's always fun to work with you.
Thank you so much. I feel the same way.
So for listeners who don't know you, tell us a little bit about who you are and your background.
Sure. I'm a school adjustment counselor. So in Massachusetts, that's my license is school adjustment counselor, school social worker. In the district where I work, it's a big city. We have about 17,000 kids.
Oh, wow.
So unfortunately, I have a colleague who's also a school adjustment counselor, but it's just us in our building. I'm in an elementary school, pre-K to 5, but our school psychologists are spread so thin, they can only do testing and go to meetings, so they aren't able to service kids. There's only 4 BCBAs in the entire district for 17,000 kids, and there's no school counselors at the elementary level. It's just school adjustment counselors. So really, like, it's just us. And a big building, but my background's a little different. I got my bachelor's in art therapy, my master's in expressive arts therapy and mental health counseling. Then I went back to school and became a nurse. I thought for a while I was going to like do therapy and prescribe meds and become a nurse practitioner, but after doing a little bit of the medical field, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So I was like working in group homes and in hospitals and feeling kind of burnt out. And that's what led me to work in the schools, because I was like, I need a job with better boundaries and work-life balance. So I ended up in the schools. I've been there since 2007, and I like absolutely love that. I love having, like, I can work really hard during the day, but then I can come home to my kids. I have the summers and the vacations off, so it really can't be beat.
That's awesome. Wow. I love hearing how counselors have such a variety of backgrounds, like what experiences you must bring to your students. Do you do a lot of art therapy now at school?
Yeah, I do. When I was I've worked at all levels. I'm with elementary now, so it's a little less. I do more play therapy than art therapy, just because my kids don't really have like the abstract reasoning skills. But when I was working with teens, like it was like every single session when I was with the older kids, we would do expressive arts. Now it's like more play therapy, some art therapy, but not as intense as when kids are a little bit like middle school, high school. They're really looking for those expressive outlets to like put their thoughts and feelings into. And when they're like super little, they're not quite there yet, in my
Right.
experience.
So I think we have some middle school counselors listening too. Just curious, what would be like an expressive art activity you would do with middle school?
So something that I love to do with middle school kids is teach them. First, I show them a done origami box with like a lid and a cover, and you have to kind of practice how to do it on your own first. And the kids will always say, "Oh, I can't do that." And I'm like, "No, let me show you. You can do this." And I usually get the 12 by 12 fun like scrapbook paper, so then they can pick out which ones they want, and I teach them how to do it. And then on the outside, they will use like collage or oil pastels, whatever mediums they want to represent like what they show to the world. And then on the inside, like how they are inside, that's just for them.
Oh,
That's something that like and it takes more than one session. Like a lot of times with older kids and expressive arts things, that like I would do it over a period of a few sessions, because it was really like project-based stuff, but they love doing things like that.
oh, that's beautiful. I love that activity. Thank you for sharing.
No
Yeah.
problem.
They make the origami box also.
Yeah, yeah. So I teach them how to do that. And there's a lot of like, so about art therapy, it's like, it's about the process of doing it in and of itself. Like the process of making art is actually healing, and being creative is really good for you. But also when you give kids something like that, like they're working through their frustration tolerance, like, because it's like, oh, I can't get this right, or their negative self-talk, like I'll never be able to do that or whatever. But then there's also the end product, which you can then process and talk about. And doing that in a group setting with kids is really pretty unbelievable, because they're they're a lot deeper than like you would think when you pull out the art supplies and stuff. It's pretty amazing, actually.
I love that. And I love what you're saying about the frustration. I was actually just listening to a podcast this morning. I think it was Andrew Huberman, who's interviewing like a parenting expert, but they were talking about how right now, today, children are at like a disadvantage because when what their desire and the instant gratification, it's like so quickly to get what you want. So for example, if you want to watch a movie, back in the day, we'd be like, hey, mom and dad, can we go rent this movie? And if like get in the car, go to Blockbuster, hope that they have it. They gave this example. But now it's like, oh, sure, get on Netflix. There's like 3,000 movies to choose from. So like from your desire to the reward is like super quick. Whereas in a project, and so anyways, they were saying that they're starting to see some kids are like, parents are saying, oh, my kid's struggling with reading. We're having all these issues, but it's because it's the first time something's been like really hard, or it's going to take several weeks before they start to see, the fruits of their labor. So I love this idea of like, I mean, I've done origami before. It's definitely challenging and
Yeah.
frustrating at times, but then your reward is this beautiful thing.
Right.
That you created. So I love that. I love that idea of like working through the frustration, and that's part of the healing process. And then So that's just one benefit, but then actually, the symbolism of the outside of the box, the inside of the box, that's the
Yeah.
whole counseling piece. Yeah,
And
that's
then you
awesome.
discuss that, and it's just, there's so much in there,
Right.
so yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome. Well, thank you. Kind of a tangent. I was just so curious because I find that fascinating. And then I'm also another little tangent, but I'm just so curious. I've always wanted to work like in the group home setting. I think that would be definitely challenging,
Yeah.
but really cool experience as well. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was a clinical coordinator in a group home for girls. So they were mostly in the Department of Children and Families custody. Some of them had like DMH custody too, but it was extremely challenging because I was in a salaried position and they would expect me to work all the time and then be on call. So like I would be sleeping and they would be calling, oh, this kid is suicidal or whatever. It was just like I felt like I had no boundaries. I learned so much. Like I did individual therapy, group therapy, family therapy. I would go into prisons and do family therapy with the girls in the prisons. Like I learned so much, and I was billing insurance, and then I was navigating all the staff issues from the direct care staff because I had to oversee them, and there was a lot with that. So it was for sure an amazing learning experience, but I did it for about 17 months and I was pretty burnt out because there were no boundaries since when I
Right.
wasn't there, they were always calling me with issues. So yeah, it was really great to learn. And I found in that work that the kids were very traumatized. Obviously, they were like removed from their guardians and things. And what was probably one of the most profound things that I experienced and learned clinically is that the kids that give you the hardest time initially, those are the kids, if you stick with them, those are the ones you can do the most like profound and healing work with. Those are the type of kids that would like initially try to like push me away or be really, like they would have these walls and defense mechanisms up and really kind of be pretty nasty to me. And I would be like, nope, I'm still showing up here every day. And I had some incredible like breakthroughs with those kids by just, being consistent and letting them know like, hey, I'm here for you no matter what. So I think that was a good learning experience.
Oh, yes, because they probably, have some history of broken trust. So they're just testing you, like, how mean
Totally.
can I be where she's still going to show up for me? Oh, that's powerful. What do you have a strategy? Because I'm sure some counselors see that in the school setting as well.
Yeah.
Um, do you have a strategy for like building rapport with those really challenging students?
Well, I had some kids, it was mostly in the group home, a little bit doing inpatient where I would have to do like a meditation before, and I would like actually visualize like a barrier around me, like a colorful kind of shield, like protecting me because like you can't take it personally, it's not about you. So I would do that visualization before going into the session. So because some of the kids really know what to say to like really push your buttons too, right? So that was what I found to be helpful. And then obviously getting good supervision too to like talk it out because it's tough. Like at times it felt like emotional abuse, but
Right,
I
right,
stuck with it and I made some amazing progress with those kids. So I'm proud of that. But to do that I couldn't see myself doing that for a whole 30-year career with like them calling me when I was trying to sleep and
right.
stuff. It just wasn't sustainable the way it was set up.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's understaffed and underpaid and just, yeah, crazy
Like,
demanding.
totally.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I just was so curious. I love your background. Who wants to have a coffee with me? It's time for our monthly Coffee with a Counselor training. April's topic, How to Teach When You're Not a Teacher, a classroom lesson survival guide. If you've ever struggled with managing classroom behaviors, figuring out what to teach in your class lessons, or figuring out how to engage students, you're going to love this topic. These are things that I used to struggle with. I've learned so much, and I cannot wait to share what I've learned with you. Remember, the Coffee with a Counselor trainings are free for Impact members. If you're an Impact member, you get this month and every single month's training included in your membership. But if you're not, we would love for you to join us. For the price of your daily Starbucks run, about $10, you can join our Coffee with the Counselor training. Included is a PD certificate and a fun freebie. Again, that's How to Teach When You're Not a Teacher, a classroom lesson survival guide. Go to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/coffee to save your seat. I can't wait for our coffee date. See you there. But let's dive into today's topic. We're going to talk about anxiety. So we've been talking about that on the podcast because we were going to do it just for 1 month for March, but then it kind of spilled into April, and I just feel like it's such a need. We're getting so many referrals for this right now. So tell me, what do you wish more educators knew about anxiety?
Yes, anxiety is so huge. Probably the number one thing I see with kids. And my first thing I would say is don't send kids home who are anxious. I think a lot of times like administrators or counselors, whoever, like they feel frustrated because a lot of times anxiety doesn't manifest like just like, oh, I'm worried, I'm having these worried thoughts. It's like oppositional behavior or aggression or procrastination or inflexibility, rigid thinking, avoidance. So like we have to figure out if it's anxiety, and if it is, we can't send those kids home because then it's just going to make it so much worse because they're going to learn that by acting out, they get what they want to avoid school and be at home. And it just increases all the things. So even though it's super difficult, if a kid is very, very anxious and very dysregulated, to keep them in school, I feel strongly that you have to do that it's the best thing to do, not send them home. When I've seen patterns of kids getting sent home, it just seems like the behavior just escalates and escalates more and more because they keep amping it up so they can get back home.
Mhm.
I also think that with kids who are anxious, just like in a classroom setting, I know a lot of people have calm corners and I love calm corners, but I do think kids with anxiety need to be taught like structured breaks. Like they are, if you just say go take a break, they can kind of ruminate on some of those anxious thoughts sometimes and end up feeling more anxious because they're so like cognitively focused. So I think that like teaching them strategies, whether it's like cognitive distractions, like, oh, do this Sudoku or this crossword puzzle, or giving them a very structured break, I think can be a real game changer for them and not just be like, go take a break, you know?
I love that. Yeah, I hadn't thought of doing the Sudoku or I love those personally as well. I'm trying to think of the last time I was feeling very anxious. I should have done one of those. Or a crossword puzzle. That's interesting because it's cognitively engaging, like you were
Mhm.
saying.
Like you can't be thinking about what's worrying you and doing a Sudoku.
Right.
Oh, Sudoku. I don't know how to say it,
Right.
but you know what I mean. Like you need sometimes a distraction. I'm not saying like all the time avoiding your thoughts or whatever, but sometimes it can be helpful.
That's really good. What other anxiety strategies do you like to teach to kids?
Well, and I love the expressive arts, like doing coping skill crafts and stuff with kids. I like a lot of somatic techniques. Like I find that kids who are anxious are really like in their heads a lot. So one of my favorite things, we call it shake, wiggle, shake, is literally like we put on music and we shake our bodies out. And it seems silly the first time you're doing it, but it actually is so helpful to like shift that energy. So I think somatic techniques are very helpful. I love CBT stuff, so teaching kids to change their unhelpful thoughts, identifying their unhelpful thoughts. In my book, Skills for Big Feelings, I teach kids a 4-step strategy called FBTS. So the first step is to name their feelings, and we teach them like all your feelings are okay, like anxious, whatever, angry. And then the second step is to take 3 slow, deep breaths, B for breath. T is for thought. They choose a helpful thought in that situation. And S is a skill. So they pick a coping skill. And I find, again, with anxious kids, giving them a structure like that, like a formula, is just super helpful for them. So yeah, any gorilla hug, like just like squeezing your body here, squeezing your body here, self massage, like it's like massaging your ears, massaging your hands. Those are the type of things that like tapping on your body that gets them out of their heads and into their bodies, I think can be really impactful.
Yes. Oh, I love that so much. What about, how do you feel about like grounding exercises?
I like those. I think that, one, if you have a kid who like dissociates or something. You have to be a little careful sometimes, but I love like the in the moment, like, 5 things you can see. I think those are so helpful for kids. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I like to use those as well. What about in regards to like preventative strategies? So often we see students come to our office anxious and we're trying to deal with it in the moment. But what do you offer for preventative strategies? What do you suggest?
Yeah, so for me, like I said, I work in this big urban school that has very few resources. I'm really it in terms of behavior and mental health. So, I do tier 1, like I push into classrooms and teach all kids coping skills, and that's just been what's been the game changer for me. Teaching all the kids the skills because I realize like there's kids who but early on in my career, I was just focused on the kids who are externalizing their behavior. And I was missing the kids who were struggling, that were just like internally struggling, like some of those anxious kids. I didn't see it. I got a call from the Department of Children and Families about a kid who like went through something horrific. And I was horrified. I was like, oh my God, they're like sitting quietly in class. I had no idea. And that shifted everything for me. I was like, I need to be like who knows what these kids are going through, like I need to teach everyone all these skills. I was focused on all my time like putting out fires, running around, and I wasn't really happy in that approach. So when I shifted to doing tier 1, teaching everybody skills to everyone in second grade, they learn about how their thoughts are connected to their feelings, and their feelings their choices. They learn how to change their unhelpful thoughts. They learn coping strategies. Teaching all of them and then having universal language like in the school. We do a coping skill of the week. We put it on a bulletin board. We do it on morning announcements. Like, so then when a kid has an issue, it's like also the teachers have the same language, the assistant principal, everyone. I think for me, that has just been the game changer, is not just focus on those heavy hitter kids. I'm not saying don't give them support, but start at a tier 1 level. And I know that it's hard because it was hard for me to shift from that, but I'm like way happier in my job since I started that because I'm putting out way less fires. And when a kid does come anxious, I'm like, okay, let's use your FBTS strategy. And they're like, okay, and they do it with me. So
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's so great. I couldn't agree more. I love the idea of the common language with staff, with the students, principals, everybody. What about parents? Are you doing anything for family support or what's
yeah,
that?
so when I teach the kids all the skills, like they go home with the workbook.
Mm.
When I used to do skills for big feelings in a small group, I would send weekly things home to the parents. But when I do it to the whole class, I just give them the workbook and they get a letter to their families. And their homework is they have to teach their families those
Oh,
skills
I
too.
love that.
And a
Yeah.
lot of times the parents call me and thank me, and they'll be like, I had this mom, she was like, oh, I was having like road rage. And my daughter was like, oh, like use your skills, mom. And I was like, you're welcome.
Yeah,
You
that's hilarious.
know, yeah. So yeah, the preventative stuff is really what shifted everything in my career, honestly.
No, I love that. Yeah, it's like the 80-20 rule, right? Like try to get 80% of the kids just in that preventative approach. And then you'll probably still have about 20% that you have to see, in group or individual.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
I love that too. Well, this is awesome. I love chatting with you, Casey. You have so many things to share with us. Tell us, you have your book, right? Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
So my book is Skills for Big Feelings, a guide for teaching kids relaxation, regulation, and coping techniques. Basically, it's a 12-week curriculum. I wrote it for educators, so not only can like a counselor use it, but also a teacher can use it. And I started the program. It took me 7 years to write, which sounds crazy to me, but it did because I kept changing it based on the kids and their needs and everything. So that book is really like my life's work, and I'm like super proud of it. It's 12 sessions. They build on each other. There's each week there is things to send home to the families. There's a coloring workbook for the kids. So every skill that they learn, they color. Coloring is like a very mindful, like stress relieving activity. So they color the skills. It helps them remember them. They bring it home at the end. it's all like it's all scripted for you, and there's like IEP goals that goes with it. You can use it as like a tier 2 or tier 3, but it can be also used as a tier 1, like whole class, whole school thing. That book is really like just my life's work.
I love it. No, I love that it took you 7 years. Like that's way better. It's clearly thoughtfully designed, right?
Yeah.
And revised. And yeah, that's excellent. Awesome. We'll definitely link to that. Before we go, I want to know, what advice would you give to a new school counselor?
Okay, that's a great question. I would say don't let kids avoid what they're anxious about. Like we can't accommodate kids' anxiety. And I think it's easy, even as a parent myself, like I know like you don't want your kids or your students to be like upset about things. So it's easy to be like, oh, like, let's do this instead. But we can't let kids avoid what they're anxious for. We have to teach them that, like, okay, what are your triggers? Let's make a plan to deal with your triggers and have some strategies and give them the tools to do that. Because the more they avoid something, the more anxious and harder it's going to be to cope with it. So I would say, yeah, don't let kids avoid things they're anxious about.
Great advice. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming today, Casey. Where can listeners find you if they want to follow up and connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on all the places at Whole Child Counseling. So it's wholechildcounseling.com, and like Instagram's my favorite place to be. So at Whole Child Counseling there.
Awesome. Well, we will look for you over there. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
I hope you loved this episode with Casey. Don't forget about Coffee with the Counselor. Y'all, it is tomorrow. I cannot wait to see you there. If you haven't saved your seat yet, go to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/coffee. I'll be sharing all about how to teach those classroom counseling lessons, even if you don't have teaching experience. I'm excited about this topic. I love doing Coffee with the Counselor. The more counselors we have, the better, because then we can kind of collaborate in the chat afterwards. Yes, I just love hearing from you guys. If you're an Impact member, you already get Coffee with the Counselor included in your membership, so just check your email for the Zoom link. If you're not an Impact member, you can join us. Go to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/coffee. It's $10 for the training, and then if you decide you want to check out Impact afterward, you can apply that $10 toward your first month of Impact. So I hope you guys will come tomorrow, and that I'll see you there. Okay, have a great day.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.